Okay, good morning. Welcome to day 2 of Unit 1. We are here with Fishers Junior High School from Indiana. We are at the We the People National Invitational. My name is Christine Hull, and I will be facilitating today. In a moment, I will have the judges introduce themselves, followed by the students, and then we will begin the hearing. Students will deliver a 4-minute prepared statement, followed by 8 minutes of judge questions. My microphone will be muted during the hearing, and I will hold up the 1 minute and time signs. I suggest that you use gallery view. All of the students have been spotlighted, so they will appear at the top of your screen. And at the conclusion of the hearing, judges will give brief feedback to the teams, and then we will conclude. Judges, the floor is yours.
Okay, good morning. As noted, I will be introducing myself, as will the other judges. We then ask that you introduce yourselves, and then I'll tell you the question, though this time there doesn't seem to be much of an issue as to which one it is. So, as of yesterday, just like yesterday, my name is Alan Broadman. I'm a recently retired high school teacher from East Brunswick, New Jersey, who's brought teams to national competition. Looking forward to hearing what you guys have to talk about.
Good morning. I'm Glyptis Ann Grider-Jones. I'm with the University of Louisville's McConnell Center and look forward to your presentation today.
I'm still Tim Moore from UW-Madison.
Hi, I'm Isabella Murch, the captain of Unit 1 at Fishers Junior High.
Hi, I'm Olivia Brookshire.
I'm Madison Luckcock.
I'm Ashley Wright, and our instructors are Mike Fossil and Tony Sturgeon.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So, shall we begin? Okay, I will read the question and then you may begin your statement. If man in the state of nature be so free as been said, if he be absolute lord of his own person and possessions, equal to the greatest and subject to nobody, why will he part with his freedom? Why will he subject himself to the dominion and control of any other power? How did John Locke answer these questions? According to John Locke and Thomas Jefferson, what is natural law in a state of nature? Do you agree or disagree with their reasoning? Why or why not? What did Locke mean by the social contract? Why did he think it necessary? What obligations does the social contract place on government and on the individual? You may begin.
Locke explains in chapter 2 of his second treatise, the state of nature is a state of equality in which no one has power over another and all, He notes, however, that this liberty does not equal license to abuse others and that natural law still exists in a state of nature. This natural law is a moral law, as Locke writes. The natural liberty of man is to be free from any superior power on earth and not to be under authority of man, but to only have the law of nature for his rule. If the government breaks this contract, its citizens have the right to abolish and replace that government. As seen in our own Declaration of Independence, Jefferson lists the long train of abuses committed by King George III against American colonists, invoking the Lockean prerogative to justify independence. John Locke and Thomas Aquinas popularized natural law theory. Aquinas argued God created the world according to natural laws, predictable, goal-motivated systems where life is sustained and everything runs smoothly.
Similar to Locke's beliefs, Aquinas theorized that God instilled within his people a want for things that benefit themselves. Locke called these benefits natural rights of life, liberty, and property. Thomas Jefferson echoed these natural rights in the Declaration of Independence's inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Locke argued that instinct and reason allows us to derive natural law from natural rights. Locke wrote that individuals had a duty to respect natural rights in both the state of nature and in society. Both Locke and Thomas Jefferson believed natural law commands respect for the natural rights of others. In the book Writings of Thomas Jefferson, Jefferson wrote, "The moral duties which exist between individual and individual in a state of nature accompany them into a state of society." Locke defined a social contract as the government forming an agreement with the people it intends to govern. This agreement would then enact the government to protect the individual's natural rights.
In this agreement, the individual concedes a bit of their natural rights in order for the government and society to run smoothly. This concept of instability and fear in a state of nature describes why Locke thought it was necessary to have a government through a social contract. Locke explains that there are a few outliers and bad apples in a state of nature that violate natural law, He then states that the government is effective at preventing said bad apples from violating citizens' rights. Locke relates this concept of instability of a state of nature. Locke relates this concept to instability of a state of nature. As the Constitution's preamble states, the government ensures domestic tranquility by using laws and norms to protect their constituents. As is the nature of all agreements, the social contract places obligations on two parties, the government and the people it intends to govern. These obligations would be to the benefit of both the government and its constituents.
In a social contract, the individual willingly forfeits some natural rights, such as life, getting drafted, liberty, abiding by laws, and property, paying taxes. In addition, the people choose a person or assembly of people to positions of power, who then enforce the initial social contract and ensure the protection of the natural rights of the people. This is similar to Rousseau's social contract idea of consent of the governed. The government has an obligation to live up to its agreement to protect the natural rights of citizens. In our country's history, the government has fallen short in the protection of natural rights of easily identifiable minorities in the cases of the Japanese internment during World War II, Colfax Massacre of 1873, Jim Crow laws, as well as current events including the deaths of George Floyd, Daunte Wright, and more. Although the preamble is not enforceable by law, these cases of discrimination still go against some of its basic ideals, such as establishing justice and promoting domestic tranquility. Through our social contract, the government is subject to the people, and the people are subject to the government. We have finished our testimony and are now ready for your follow-up questions.
Okay, thank you. So, if, as Locke asserted, the purpose of government is to secure the rights of the individual to life, liberty, and property, under what circumstances should government be able to limit those rights? And focus in on the circumstances when that is possible.
Government should be able to limit the natural rights of people when people are infringing on the natural rights of others.
I'd say a current example is when the government produced a mask mandate for the coronavirus. People had to wear their masks even though they claimed they had a right not to, when really that's the government just limiting parts of your liberty.
So at that point, your individual rights should trump the common good?
No, similar to utilitarianism, the common good should in most cases come before individual rights. However, this does not mean that individual rights are meaningless.
This is shown again with the mask example and also quarantining. People believe that it's their right not to wear a mask, but it's for the common good of the people that you wear a mask and that you stay home.
This concept of rights over responsibility is kind of pushed in American culture today, whereas people believe I have the right to do something, whereas it's their responsibility to do, let's say, another things such as wearing masks. It's their responsibility to look out for the people around them and not to spread the illness going around.
How would you recognize a state of nature? Are there any states of nature right now?
I would say there aren't any states of nature right now because we're in a Lockean social contract with the government. And even around the world, there are tons of government systems, but there are Rousseau's social contract where the government is dissolved after a problem like a flood or war is solved. You band together and solve the problem, and then the government is dissolved afterwards. But I'd say we don't have many governments like that today, as all of them are government systems.
Are those outliers? You in your presentation you mentioned outliers. Are they in a contract, or have they retreated to a state of nature?
Those outliers in a state of nature aren't like the rest of the people. They're almost in a Hobbesian state of nature where they kind of want to infringe on other people's natural rights and take things. And that's why Locke said people would want to go into a government system because the government can then protect their natural rights.
The people who we refer to as bad apples or outliers in a state of nature would be the people who violate natural law and who don't respect the natural rights of others and infringe upon them, similar to what my colleague just said.
Another case, these outliers might have left a social contract or never entered one simply because they don't, well, how do I say this? They do not agree with the rest of society in terms of the social contract and giving up their natural rights. Similar to the Revolutionary War, how America left Britain because they were not getting representation, even though they were offered, it would not benefit the colonists.
Thank you.
So sort of in the same vein, picking up on what you just said there, Addison, if government's not serving the purposes for which it is created, what should people have the right to do?
Locke specifically believed in Lockean prerogative, where if people aren't being protected and their natural rights aren't being protected, it's their duty to act out and rebel against the government. This can't be used in our government today because it was only meant to be used against unelected officials, but we do have our First Amendment rights to be able to petition and tell the government where we think that they're falling short.
You have to remember that in the First Amendment, it quite literally lists all the ways that you can tell a government that you are unhappy with a law, such as protesting or petitioning the government.
These protested movements can be both in person, as shown with the civil rights movement, or virtually in like virtual campaigns and over media and news.
So if I disagree with what the government's doing, and I bring a bunch of people, like-minded people, and I go to some far off place in some faraway state, and I create my own little society, is that okay? Can I basically say to government, hey, you're not protecting my rights as I see them, as they should be protected. So I'm going to go ahead and do that here in my little community. Is that okay for me to do?
Well, in order to do that, you'd have to give up your citizenship, and then you probably would want to go to another country if you're unhappy with the job that the government's doing. And if other countries are looking like, hey, this person just gave up their citizenship, what if they do that when they're in our country? It's going to make it a lot harder for you to find a place to live.
How about if it's Idaho?
I wasn't going to pick a state, but yeah.
Or Wisconsin, some remote place. Yeah, I mean, would they have to move to somewhere? I mean, some other country, or is it just find somewhere where there's nobody?
Well, in a Socratic social contract, it's believed that if you benefit from the government, you are giving consent and you are a part of that social contract. So you would really have to go somewhere where you were not benefiting from the government at all, where you are not using their currency, you are not using public roads, and even just living on the land, that can be benefiting from the government.
However, the way that the Constitution and statutory laws are today, you are able to change laws by raising cases to the Supreme Court and by proposing bills to your legislator. As shown in Connecticut's 1818 Constitution, the people had at all times right to change the Constitution, that state constitution, as they saw fit. But this was later changed by the 1965 Constitution, as that took away power from the state constitution.
Okay, so, but what if I want to stay here? Okay, and I'm off on my little island, as it were. And yes, I live within the structures of the United States, the physical land, but I'm talking about my rights, not property. Why can't I basically tell the government to get out of my face?
Well, there are people who believe, like they're sovereign citizens, who believe that the government has stopped protecting their natural rights, but these people still use currency, they still use public roads, they can still send their children to public school. And even if they were far off in another space, they, like my colleague said, they're still on the government's land.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to give you some feedback. Who'd like to start?
Sure, I can jump up. I especially liked your conversation throughout. I particularly liked how sequential you were in your opening presentation and juxtaposed the relationship both of the government and then people within the system and the tensions there. It was very easy to follow the progression of your opening statement, very clear as you move forward. So I appreciate that. I really enjoyed the conversation there and the responses as you thought about things both. Someone brought up the idea of being virtual and how that's affecting governance today. And I particularly like the thought there, right as Isabella, right there at the very end, this idea of, do you even have to move if you're, do you have to move? What's the role of property in the conversation? So thinking of these ideas in this, an increasingly virtual environment, it's very clear you all are wrestling with these very complicated ideas and thinking about why they matter today. And that was really evident. So I really appreciate your ability to think both historically, philosophically, and then in the contemporary. So well done. Thank you.
Yeah, I thought there's a couple things that stand out to me on this. Number one is you did a little more work than Locke. In other words, natural law precedes Locke, and you referenced Aquinas, which I think is quite prescient. I thought you did a nice job making distinctions between Locke and Jefferson on this idea. Now, having said that, I wish there might have been a little bit more on that distinction between Locke and Jefferson. But on the opening statement was really solid. I thought in the follow-ups, it's interesting. I thought, especially that last sequence with Alan, I thought was really wonderful. That and he eventually got to these folks, the sovereign citizens. I mean, how far can we push this notion of retreat and still use electrical lines, or use roads? So I think you took that line of questioning from Alan quite well, and then pushed it to its logical extension. So I think, which to me demonstrates a high level of understanding in this whole idea of this really, in my mind, questionable notion is the state of nature and social contract. And so this has been wonderful. Ultimately, I do have a question though. When is Tony and Mike? Are they the dinosaurs, or are they these faces that I'm looking at now? I mean, when they disappear, and these creatures are over their shoulders or in their hands there. I mean, who actually are Mike and Tony? So I'm perplexed for a couple of years now. So thank you.
I thoroughly enjoyed your presentation. Your opening statement was chock full of wonderful use of quotes to support the points you were making. I'm a big quote guy. In fact, I get into a fight with some of the teachers who would help me out because I liked quotes too much. And we were told that in nationals that we had too many. But I thoroughly enjoyed your use of them. And as noted, that I didn't just hear Locke. I heard a number of other people. I would be even more explicit on my first question. I think there was some disagreement there among the panel. I'd make that even more explicit. I disagree with, and just go ahead and then lay out the argument. Because I think there was some disagreement. I'm not sure. I wanted to make sure. I did thoroughly enjoy our piece on revolution and leaving. That's always a fun one to do with students. And you showed really strong grasp of this material and your capacity. And even when I pushed you even harder, you came right back and we had a wonderful discussion. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, judges.
Thank you.
Tim, you don't like my dinosaurs?